Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to On the Mic with Mike, the premier business radio program. I am your host, Mike King. I appreciate you being here with me. This is part of the Mike King Biz Radio Network, which is ESPN Richmond 106.1, The Choice 105.3, as well as International Business Coach Radio. We've thrown in some TV as well. CW Richmond every Wednesday and Friday at 5 a.m. That show is called Mike King Biz and Friends. All right, folks, it is time to reach out and bring someone to the microphone. He is a professional. He's part of the Bill Eastman IBGR family as well. Welcome to the program, Gayle Turner. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be here. We were just commenting it was dark 100, and you're used to getting up this early in the morning, so I'm happy to be here, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed with you.
You are. All right, sir. Really quickly, as I always say, this is a business show, so tell folks who you are and what you do.
I'm one of the co-founders and the executive producer at the Story Tellers channel. And we, besides working with people to tell the stories that matter so effectively that the people that matter to them will ask them to tell those stories again, we do management and leadership consulting. We work with boards of directors and senior management, and sometimes their subordinates around the areas of strategic planning. We do some work in terms of leadership development capacity, in terms of clarity of communication. Leaders only do three things, right? They initiate, sustain change, and they grow other leaders. And the process of initiating, sustaining change is generally pretty straightforward. You tell people what you would like them to do. You explain to them the metrics or the values by which you're going to evaluate their behavior, and then you just measure and monitor, right? But growing leaders it seems to me like an art form, and it's got three elements to it as well. There's that business of being clear, as I said a moment ago, telling people the way you'd like them to behave, how you're going to, measure whether they're in alignment with that. Then there's the good old-fashioned of living a life of integrity. You're actually walking the talk. But there's a third element that neuroscience has shared with us that is really been kind of hard for some people to believe, because when you say story to most adults, they think fairy tales, or they think think the librarian at the library reading to the little children, right? But the fact is, we are story making animals. We talk about finding meaning in this world, but quite frankly, we are meaning makers, and the way that we make meaning is with story. They've put people in MRI machines, and they tell them to do certain things, or whatever. They give them instructions, and they've shown that the brain lights up a little bit. Okay, they show them videos of people behaving in a certain way, and the MRI lights up a little bit. But when they tell people stories, they say that it looks like their brain's Las Vegas. It looks like a Christmas tree in there, because the neurons, the neurotransmitters they're moving between behavior, meaning, cause and effect. It's astounding. And the irony of what we learned about memory is that memory is not like a book that you pull off the shelf. Every time you delve into that, muscle between your ears, you're putting together different elements that have been stored in different parts of the brain. And so when a hormone may have been secreted when something was happening, which is generally tied to there having been some sort of an emotional response to the experience, it seems to be more effective. It's kind of like a hashtag up there, or some sort of a marker that makes it easier to bring things back. So when you are looking to impress upon the people who work with you, work for you, the people in your charge that you're responsible for, if you can craft, shall we say, short, pithy stories that exemplify the behavior you want, with a relatable hero, somebody that the listener can relate to, with a relevant challenge, something they're having to deal with, and a worthy struggle. People actually want to struggle along with the hero of a story so that they can feel the same sense of success or dejected failure when the hero wins or loses. and it needs to be in service of a worthy lesson. Okay. So when you're thinking about those elements and trying to put something together, because a lot of us tell stories all the time. We don't go around saying, let me tell you a story, but they go, you know what happened to me this morning? Whatever the case may be, right? And there's a story in there because we're all the hero of our own little world, the old little movie in our head. So we work with executives not only on this issue of leadership development, but also with the issue of strengthening their corporate cultures. Because, culture is basically just the way we do things around here, right? But a CEO is probably most, what's the word I'm looking for here, valuable asset. It could either be talked about in their brand, as their brand, i.e. their reputation in the marketplace, or their culture. And from where I stand, the two of them are interrelated. Brands have multiple constituencies, and one of them are your employees. Well, whatever you're telling the public that they should expect when they come to do business with you, your employees need to understand that and need to be behaving in alignment with that, right? Consequently, that's your culture. Are they behaving in alignment? Are they not? And I hear from executives all the time, I'm not happy with my culture for whatever reason. And I want to say to you, just as I wasn't born with a work ethic, okay, it had to be trained into me, the same thing is true about your employees and their values, i.e. the metrics by which you're going to evaluate their behavior. They need to hear over and over what our values are, forgive me, and they need stories that exemplify them. Well, one of the ways that I've done that over the years when I go into an organization is I ask, who's a hero around here? And when they'll say, oh, Mike King. And I'll go, well, why? Why is Mike heroic? And they will tell you the story. And that is a quick way to uncover an organization's values, right? Because Mike's doing whatever it is we all want to do one day when we grow up, right?
There you go, Gayle Turner with the master storyteller. Alrighty, sir. Here's a question. One of the great parts about having a radio show is I get to talk to the experts. So, so you are a leadership consultant as well as a storyteller. Do you feel like leaders are born or can they be developed? And the same thing goes with storytellers. Are some people natural storytellers, and can you develop that skill?
I'm always flattered when somebody says to me, like, boy, you're a natural born storyteller. But I want to share a story with you. I grew up working construction. My daddy was a bricklayer, and I went to work the first day that I was 10 years old. I mean, I was so happy. I had always wanted to work with my daddy. And by noon, carrying brick, I weighed about 60 pounds in those days, and a brick weighed 6. By noon, walking back and forth all morning long carrying bricks. If I didn't see the construction site for the rest of my life, I'd have been quite happy. And so, I'm asking, when are we going home? And the men on the job said, when the job's done. And that was my first introduction to the idea of a work ethic, first of all, although my parents had been telling me to clean my room and do my homework forever. But this was the first time you didn't get to go home until the job was done, right? Years later, I began to realize I had become one of the men who got the job done, because the question wasn't anymore, when are we going home? It was, what have we got to get done to make the job done, right? Now, I grew up with a daddy who was a storyteller, and I used to love it whenever we'd leave a job site and we'd ride around the pickup truck, and I got to listen to his stories because he modeled for me those stories. Well, here I am. I'm 22 years old. The first 20 years of my professional life, I was an actor, okay? And I was cast in the first Virginia production of Godspell. So I'm down in Norfolk. My parents have driven down. My godparents have driven down. And they got there early. And my dad had slipped into the theater wanting to say hi. And it turned out that we were having a last-minute rehearsal that afternoon. Well, he and my godfather sat there for a while. And they got up and they left. I didn't even know they were there. They'd been so discreet. And after the show that night, after I'd gotten all the appropriate kudos, my daddy took me aside and he said, Jack, my godfather, we dropped into the theater today and we watched you, and you did this dance number, and the choreographer said again, and you did it again. And then he said again, and you did it again and again and again. And finally we slipped out because, quite frankly, we were exhausted. And I asked Jack as I walked across the parking lot to the car, could you see any different? He said, no, they all look good to me. And my dad looked at me and he said, "This is the first time I ever realized how hard you work to make what you do look so effortless."
Oh,
So,
oh,
okay. Now I know my mom and my dad, they loved me and they respected what I did, or I should say they appreciated what I did. But I think this was the first time I ever felt respected by my dad for the work I did as a performer. Now I'd been performing since I was 4 years old, right? So I'd already been doing this for 18 years. And I almost said something smart like, mouth like, what'd you think? I was brilliant just because I was your son? But what I
you
realized
thought that.
was, yeah, well, there occasionally, the good Lord does put a damper on my tongue. But what I realized at the time was, yeah, my daddy used to drive me to rehearsals. Here, my mama, they drive me and drop me off, and then they come home and come back for me. He'd never seen me rehearse before. He had no idea, nor does the general public have any idea, that if you see anybody who does something well, okay, they might have had a propensity for it. Okay. They might have enjoyed it early on, but I guarantee you, if they're good at it, they work at it. So, praising people for, my God, you're a natural born storyteller. I just simply take it in as I think a lot of people have this view that you are or not something. Now, I'm 6 foot these days. I used to be 6'1", but gravity's been having its way with me. But I was never going to be the guy who was, but so fast once I started growing. Okay, so my body wasn't designed to do certain things. Okay, that's it. Now I could have been better by working at it. And so, yes, I'm sure that all of us may have some propensity, and if we're fortunate, we find whatever it is, that role that the good Lord wanted us to do in this world. But you got to work at it. You got to work at it to be a leader. You got to work at it to be a storyteller. You got to work at it to be a good radio host like yourself.
there you go, Gayle Turner on the mic with Mike King. We bring you the best and the brightest. Sir, when you look out there as leadership as a consultant, what do you think we're lacking now? When you see and hear of leaders and the whole leadership world.
Mike, that's there. There's more answers to that question than you can shake a stick at. But I'll tell you the thing that upsets me the most. Somewhere low, back in I want to say it's 1970, Milton Friedman put out this idea that the only way that you recognize the value of a business was the return on the investment to the investors. I think it's a total misreading of Adam Smith's either the theory of moral sentiment or the Wealth of Nations. And maybe it's because I'm the son of an entrepreneur, a small business owner, and I personally have never had more than 50 employees in any of the companies that I've run. So I've not been a an international. Well, I have run an international business, but like I say, I've never had more than 50 employees. But my daddy so deeply impressed me in that growing up, I would look at ways to get a job done easier on a job site. And I'd say, Daddy, we get a backhoe in here and we can knock out this foundation, dig out the footing and be done with it. And he'd say, yeah, it's a good idea. It's a good idea. And he'd look at the men working for him and he said, Gayle's had a great idea now. He said, we can get a backhoe in here and dig this thing out much faster and easier. And all the guys with the picks and shovels were like, yeah, I like that idea. And he said, the only problem is I got enough money either for the backhoe or to pay y'all for today and tomorrow to dig it. What do y'all want to do? And what the response would be, shut up, Gayle, and grab a pick. Okay. Because what my dad was always trying to do was to keep his team together. Now, half the people who worked for us, were named Turner. My uncles, my cousins, there was definitely a family enterprise going on, and the folks that weren't were either neighbors or people that had gone to church with us, or guys that my dad had picked up over the years, right? That just became part of his crew, his posse, so to speak. And so when I was thinking about going into business, my dad used to look at me and he'd say, look, anybody who's paying attention wakes up in the middle of the night sometime and worries about payroll. Now, you got two choices. You can either be the guy laying there on the bed worried about making payroll, or you can be the guy laying there worried that the guy worried about making payroll ain't worried about you being on it. Okay. And so I have chosen to be, I've been self-employed all but 6 years of my adult life, mainly because I would just rather shoulder that responsibility of making payroll than I would lay there with the anxiety and helplessness, the word that the guy who is ain't worried about me being on it, right? And so what I'm bothered by is when leaders feel like their responsibility to their investors is greater than their responsibility to their employees, to their customers, to the communities that they do business in, to their suppliers. Because I feel like if we're treating our people right, then they're going to treat our customers right. If we're treating our customers right, they're going to do business with us, right? And hopefully, if we are conducting our business in a way that is good for the communities in which we do business, then in the end, we're going to have assuming we operate our business, well, then we're going to end up with a return from our investors. But when you turn this whole daggone thing on its head and behave as though, number one, as though business is a right, which it's not, it's a responsibility. The government allows us to operate our business because it does something good for the community, right? It keeps people employed, lets them put a roof over their head, it provides products and services, and it's not a corrosive element to the communities in which they operate. So the thing that bothers me when I deal with leaders periodically is a lack of this sense of, it's not about being in charge. It's about taking care of the people in your charge. You're ex-Army, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, my daddy was Navy, right? And the first thing he always said to me that the number one responsibility for any leader is taking care of their people. And so who's my people? Are my investors my people first and foremost? Or are my employees and then my suppliers or my customers and the communities within which I work? So I'm not saying be disrespectful to your investors or not to be good stewards of their resources, but they are not the end all and be all. And so that's the biggest challenge that I face, because we all live into the stories we tell ourselves. And I just think Milton Friedman made a mistake with that particular story, because it's definitely, from my point of view, it's like cherry picking the Bible to find a verse that justifies doing something that is not right. This is cherry picking of Adam Smith to justify me being selfish.
There we go. Master storyteller Gayle Turner is with us. I always talk to people about culture. When you see and you go into an organization and the culture, the CEO says to you, "I'm not happy with my culture." Give our listeners something that the CEO, the boss, could do to change the culture.
Well,
and is it possible once the culture is set? Is it possible for him to change it?
Well, I'm an optimist, so I always believe change is possible. I mean, change is really easy. I mean, it is. Think about it. How many times have you gone on a diet? Sustaining change is a bit of a problem, but changing's easy. I'm quitting smoking. Yeah, and about 3 hours later, I quit quitting, whatever the case may be, right? I absolutely believe that change is possible. And I think what happens most often when an executive has looked around and said, "I just don't like the way things are going around here." I used to start all of my consulting engagements in the old days by playing the Michael Jackson song, "I'm Starting with the Man in the Mirror," because I believe that change always begins with the leaders themselves. It's not about other people doing things differently. It's about the leader doing things differently that will then inspire the others to self-inspire to do things differently. Okay. So I don't believe in you can't get good people. I sincerely believe everybody comes to work initially wanting to do a good job. And we either create a fertile environment that encourages and supports that, or we don't, because it's daggone easy to squash other people's initiative. It's very easy to stick a pin in people and deflate them. So I'm generally very candid. When somebody tells me that, I ask, well, what are you thinking about doing differently? So we begin, like anything, with a clear assessment. Know thyself, right? So talk to me about what your values are. Okay, why do you think those values are not being exemplified in your management team and in your subordinates? Where along the line do you think there's a breakdown? It almost always, my daddy used to say to me, it's good that I'm a storyteller. When I was growing up, people thought I was either going to be a preacher, a lawyer, or an actor. And I thought about seminary for years, but I figured there's an easier way to get an audience. And as far as being a lawyer was concerned, it was just too much detail work. So, being an actor, being a storyteller, working as a consultant, most everybody who knows me socially thinks of me as a talker, right? I mean, here you are today, you dropped the Victrola needle and I haven't stopped, right? But professionally, what I am is a listener and an observer. My daddy, back to my daddy again, he was always saying, the good Lord gave you 2 eyes and 2 ears and only 1 mouth. You might want to think about using them proportionately, okay? And so when I go as a consultant, what I generally am is a pair of fresh eyes. I do have the benefit of going into lots of organizations, and so I get to see common problems. And while, what did Dostoevsky say? I think that all happy families are alike, but all unhappy families are unique in their unhappiness. There are some things that are common in organizations that work well, and you can find a myriad of ways of screwing that up, okay? So the goal when you walk in is to just look and listen, see how people treat each other. I really only have 2 values, Mike. I mean, I have a list of over 300 that I share with people if they need a place to sort of pick and choose to sort of work through what's important to them, and we could do pairs comparisons to figure out what's most important for them, so that they can differentiate their organization and be able to make the customer experience one that people will want to come back to over and over. But my 2 values are, number one is respect for myself, clear boundaries, respect for the people that I work with, being considerate of them, respect for the work, treating the work, in a way that shows that, this is worthy of our time, that we're doing something to serve and make a contribution to our community. And the second one is, Stephen Covey said that trust is the cement that bonds all relationships. And so it's incumbent upon the individual to be trustworthy. And I actually like to flip that around. I want to be worthy of the trust that people they give to me. Okay, so that means we're back to the issue of respect. The 2 of those, I think they dovetail well together. So I always try to be prompt. Matter of fact, I try to be early. Growing up with a daddy who was a Vince Lombardi fan, 15 minutes early was on time, and on time was late, and late was the door was locked, right? And so, and in the theater, we're due there an hour ahead of time. So our call is an hour ahead of time, and if you're a minute late, man, you're causing anxiety because people are wondering, well, will he be here? Are we going to be able to do the show tonight? Are we going to have to get the understudy in? So when I did a lot of work in California, I had an office there for a while, and people would always say they were late because of the traffic, and I was like, man, there is always traffic. I mean, leave 4 hours early if necessary and have a good day and get here. But I don't want to hear this business about you're late to see the client because of traffic. Get out of my face. I mean, it's just not acceptable behavior, right? So, but once again, we're back to my daddy. Don't be late. It gives him time to think about what's wrong with you. It's just preservation to be there early, right? So we're back to I ask questions and I listen. I've always believed that the solution to a problem exists within the community that I'm working with. Rarely have I ever walked in the door, looked and go, oh, well, here's the problem, and here's the solution. Because first of all, I know that when I was a theater director, if I told an actor what to do, the audience would look at that actor and he or she was not working from an internal motivation. They were just doing a task they've been told to do. And the audience wouldn't necessarily know it, but they could feel it. And it's the same thing with people. When they're just doing something by rote, when you haven't been able to help them get to the understanding of, Sinek calls it, your why, right? If they haven't been able to absorb their why, then you're not going to get an authentic experience. So there's no magic to this. It's just hard work. It's always hard work. Fortunately, for some of us, we happen to enjoy whatever the hard work we've chosen to do. And my daddy, this is the last thing I'm going to say on this. My daddy could make digging a ditch fun. Okay. He could turn anything into a game. And so, the men would be out there. We'd either be singing, we'd be pushing, we'd be doing whatever. We'd set little competitions between each one of us, how fast we can do this, but also how well. And so in the end, the satisfaction is found in doing your job well. And I think that comes from having a good why, knowing that you're serving your community. And so you're getting paid for the value that you bring to the table. And I think that's how a lot of us find our self-worth.
There you go, Gayle Turner, dropping nuggets of knowledge. Very quickly, we only got a little bit of time left, but I got to ask you. So when you hit the CEO of the boss with the man in the mirror, and maybe they don't get it, can a groundswell from the bottom up change culture in an organization, or does the change have to come from the top?
I'll tell you where change dies. Change dies at middle management.
Because they're trying to stay employed.
But they're just trying to keep things going steady, right? Because they get reward for stability. Okay. And so when people start talking about change, the army's run by the non-coms. Okay. So yeah, there are lots of groundswells for change, and there's lots of senior management coming down and says, we're going to do things differently here. And there's the old IB theory, right? I be here when you came, I be here when you're gone. And so, yeah, I think change can happen anywhere, but it always begins at the individual level. If you all get a chance, there's a lovely little book out there called Fish, and it says that they have 4 principles. Adult work should be play, be present, choose your attitude, and look for ways to make other people's days. And that little piece alone can transform a department, can transform an individual, a department, a division. People have to take responsibility for change upon themselves, because change always starts with the individual, and then others will see it and want to model that behavior or replicate that behavior. But I will say one thing: if a senior executive doesn't get it, I'm just not the right consultant for everybody. And I have no problem with that.
How can people find you out there, sir?
How can they find me?
Yes,
Gayle, Gayle, Gayle at Storytellers, that's plural, channel.com, or 804-243-1001. And I'm always happy to listen to anybody.
When are you on IBGR?
2:00 on Friday afternoons. The show is called Stories Matter, helping leaders transform lives. This week, I'm interviewing Barry Moore, the CEO and president. Yeah, he's the CEO and president of Central Virginia Better Business Bureau, an organization that every business that cares about their community should be investing in and belonging to as an accredited business, which you are you not, Mike?
Yes, sir.
As am I. As am I.
Shout out to Barry Moore. Shout out to you, sir, for the great things you're doing. So this has been On the Mic with Mike. Gayle Turner's here with us. You'll be hearing him back again. He's out everywhere. Combining storytelling with management and leadership principles. Like you say, change dies at middle management. That is true.
Well, they're the ones that keep our organizations going, and they're the ones that we need to inspire to change. And they're hard to convince sometimes, but it's rewarding when they choose to drink the Kool-Aid.
There you go. On the Mic with Mike, we bring you the best and the brightest. Mike King here on the Mic with Mike. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Now, take care, sir.
Ciao, buddy.